Hello, my name is Deborah and welcome to the Newcastle Gateshead Managing Emotions group. These are videos for the online components of the group, and they're meant to go along with materials that are sent via email and phone coaching that you can have to discuss your experiences of the homework and of completing the exercises. Okay. This week is session 8 of 12 weeks, and it's the first of 2 sessions this week and next week where we're looking at mindfulness skills. Okay, just for 2 weeks. So you should have the workbook that was sent with you via email, and you can print it off, or you could just look at it on your laptop or on your phone if you've got that opportunity. On the first page it talks about questions that you might have in the materials last week when we finished off emotional regulation as a topic, or there might be questions about your homework, and that's something that we would do over the phone. Okay. So it talks on page 2 about the goals of mindfulness, and this is an opportunity for you to think just a little bit about, right, well, we're going to do 2 weeks of learning more about mindfulness skills, and I just wondered if there was anything in particular that you would like to get out of it. So it might be that you're a total beginner when it comes to mindfulness, and you might think, well, just learning anything might be good. You might want to do some practices, doing mindfulness. A lot of people don't like practices doing mindfulness, so I'm doubting that one, but you never know, you might want to. Or you might want to think, right, well, how on earth is this going to help me? How's this going to help me with when I feel anxious or when I feel angry? How's this going to help me? Okay. So you might want to spend a little bit of time writing down, either in your workbook or your notebook, what you would really like to get out of these sessions. Okay. So on the same page at the lower bit, it talks about the different states of mind, which is something that we discussed in when we looked at distress tolerance right at the beginning of the 12 weeks of the Managing Emotions group. So I hope you all remember that we talked about logical mind, emotional mind and wise mind. And the slides that are on the next couple of pages, next 3 pages, are just copies from the materials that we went through at that time. And it talks about emotional mind being that state of mind, that thinking that's really, when your thinking's really affected by your emotions. So it might be how anxious you feel, it might be how happy you feel, it might be how sad you feel, and how that can really influence your thinking and change your thinking patterns. Okay, so that's your emotional mind. Logical mind is your more logical mind state. So it might be when you plan to make a meal, when you plan to do a journey, how, making sure that you've got the bus money, how are you going to get to the bus route, how are you going to get off the bus, when you're going to get off the bus. That's using more of your logical mind. Okay. And at the bottom of page 3, there's a diagram that highlights the different qualities that each of the mind states has. So it talks there about emotional minds much more related to impulsiveness. So if you're in an emotional mind thinking, you're much more likely to act impulsively. Whereas logical mind's about being sensible, it's analysing the situation, being thought through, thinking things through. And if you remember, we talked about getting a balance between the two. It's not saying that emotional mind is terrible and logical mind is wonderful. We talked as well about the importance of having some emotion as part of recognising your emotions as part of your decisions, and how you don't want to kind of be completely cut off from your emotions. And that's where that wise mind bit comes in the middle. So that's a combination of the two, where you recognise both your emotional state but also logical thinking's in there as well. and then you're able to come to wise decisions that are influenced by both and not overly influenced by one or the other. Okay. Now, the reason that they introduce or reintroduce the idea of emotional mind, wise mind, and logical mind is just because one of the key things about mindfulness is that it can really help you to recognise what's your thinking style. So it's really important to be able to know, am I in emotional mind thinking at the moment, and is that helpful for me? But the first thing that you've got to do is be able to know if you're in emotional mind thinking or not. And that's one of the things that mindfulness skills can help you to do. It can help you to recognise whether you're in emotional mind thinking or logical mind thinking. There are lots of other things that mindfulness skills can help you do, some of which we've already talked about over the 12 weeks. But that's one of the things it can help you do. It can help you take that little bit of a step back and really explore, is this emotional mind thinking? Is this logical mind thinking? So if you move on to page 4, on the top of page 4, it gives a really good quote about what mindfulness involves. Now, some people might have attended mindfulness groups before, or they might have joined a mindfulness practice, maybe at recovery college or on the wards, as part of other treatments that they've had, is quite common. So some people might know some of this already or more often as well. There are some people in the group who just know nothing about mindfulness and this is their first time. But this, so this is a brief description on the top of page 4 about what's involved in mindfulness. So for some of you this might ring some bells, for some of you it might be new. Mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. It's the ability to be aware of your thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and actions in the present moment without criticising yourself or your experience. It includes learning to observe internal events, things that go on inside your body, like feeling hungry, feeling tired, feeling angry, and external events, a noise outside, somebody being cross with you, being cut up by a car, when you're driving, that's an external event, without trying to stop them when painful or extend them when pleasant. So there's a lot in that quote, and it does try to cover quite a lot about what mindfulness is, and I think it's worth having it, especially if it's something that isn't new to you, so you can begin to think about it in lots of different ways. I think if it is new to you, there are two parts of it that I think, or one part of it really, that's probably really important. It talks in the quote about paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally, on purpose. And I think one of the best ways to realise if we're paying attention in the present moment or not is to realise when we're not paying attention. Okay? So, a little while ago, I want to tell you a story. A little while ago, I used to have a job and I worked in Morpeth. And it would take me, to drive to Morpeth from my home would take me about 3/4 of an hour, depending on the traffic. Often I would leave my house and arrive in Morpeth without really having that much knowledge about the route or exactly how I got there. Okay. Now, I'm not saying I was dangerous, because our minds are very good at multitasking, so I did have my eye on the road. But generally, what was happening with my mind is that it wasn't really focusing on the route and the world around me. It was doing what's known as monkey mind. It's called monkey mind by the Buddhists. So a monkey mind means that you're swinging kind of aimlessly from topic to topic in your mind, okay? So I might think, as I'm driving along, oh, I'm feeling a bit hungry, actually. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit hungry. Yeah, I had a really nice tea last night. Oh, that was lovely. That was lovely. Oh, it's always me that makes the tea, isn't it? It's always me that makes the tea. How does that work? You know my partner. He never makes the tea. In fact, he never makes the tea. He never does the washing up. He never washes the clothes. Okay, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, exactly what can go on inside our heads. So instead of focusing on what I was doing, on the journey around me, or on the route ahead of me, my mind is doing monkey mind, and it's doing exactly what I described there, which is moving from, you know, what did I have to tea? Who did do the cooking? And a problem with my partner, okay? And it's that swinging along, no real direction, just kind of swinging along. And that happens to loads of us, and that's the sort of experience that happens to loads of us frequently, where you can kind of, get to the top of the stairs and then forget what you went up there for, or almost be so distracted with what's going on in your head that you can lose periods of time of your day just distracted off with this monkey mind kind of swinging between thoughts, okay? And I think one of the most important things is to think that mindfulness is the opposite of that. Mindfulness is paying attention on purpose and staying in the present moment, so really being aware of what's going on around us, okay? It's actually, I think, really good and easy thing to do as the coronavirus lockdown's on, because we've only got the present moment, haven't we? You can't really plan at the moment because everything seems to be being cancelled or put on hold, and people don't know what's going to happen in the future. So actually trying to stay in the present moment and maybe having this opportunity to use a skill that means that we stay in the present moment might be really, really helpful. So the next bit of learning is to look at the myth busters. Oh, hang on, sorry, I've missed the video. The next bit of learning is the video. So attached to the email is a clip from YouTube which gives a beginner's guide to mindfulness, and I just thought it would be fun to watch. It's just like got little cartoon characters and goes through sort of different elements of what mindfulness involves. The video itself lasts about 4 minutes, I think. You can either take a break now, or you might have watched it already, or you could watch it at the end if you wanted to. Okay, so after the video, there's the Mythbusters exercise. So you will already have received a sheet with lots of different statements on, like this one that says, the top statement says, mindfulness is only for Buddhists. And what we would like you to do for this exercise is to go through all of the statements, and you can either cut them out, which is what we do in class, cut them out and put them into 2 different piles, or you could just write on them fact or fiction. So if you think mindfulness is only for Buddhists, so you might think that that is a fact, and you would write that down next to it, okay? What we tend to have is fact group and fiction group, and then even though there isn't a pile, there tends to be a midway, we can't really decide or we can't work it out pile, okay? So that's the next exercise. If you can go through that, you might want to put the tape on pause while you do it to be able to go through all of the statements. So, welcome back if you put the tape on pause. So with the myths exercise, because there's so many statements, I'm not going to go through all of them on the video. It's something that you can talk about with you on the phone coaching. But I just thought that I would go through just a couple of them from the sheet. So one of them, I'll go through the top one. So one of them is mindfulness can help fight depression and low mood. And that is a fact. That should have been on the fact pile. There is no right and wrong in mindfulness. It's always worth having a discussion. If you didn't get it on the fact pile, you might want to talk to the facilitator who's doing the phone coaching with you. But the thing with mindfulness is there's been loads of research that has said that it does help you fight anxiety, depression, stress, exhaustion, irritability. It improves memory and reaction times. And in short, it leads people to having happier and more contented lives. So this is the research, this is what the research says, is that if people practice meditation or mindfulness regularly, these things do improve. And indeed, we offer mindfulness now on the NHS through groups like this, but also in primary care you can have different groups and different interventions, because we know research has demonstrated to us that these skills can help people with anxiety and depression. Okay, so the next one that I was going to take a look at is mindfulness is about being compassionate to yourself, and that's fact or fiction. It is a fact. Mindfulness is based on a certain amount of values, and one of the important values about mindfulness is it's about being compassionate and kind to yourself. And I think in a world where we're often not very compassionate and kind to ourselves, it's a really important thing to learn. And one of the lessons that I think that comes from it is when we do exercises, when you do exercises, mindfulness exercises, our minds often wonder, and what people say to me is, oh, I can't do it, or I'm doing it wrong. And when you do it with a compassionate perspective to yourself, instead of saying that, you would recognise that actually your mind wandering, not being able to focus and concentrate, is what human minds do. So just kind of give yourself a break, be kind to yourself about it. Don't beat yourself up because your mind's wandering. That's a really, really important part of mindfulness. And that's not to say you don't need to go, right, my mind's wandered, I'm going to bring it back to what I'm focusing on, because that's important as well. But try not to beat yourself up about it. And that's one of the things that I liked about the beginners video, the little YouTube clip that we had there, which it says it's one of the first exercises or skills that you use where actually failure is success. You know, so it's okay to go and your mind will wander, and then you bring it back. So that failure is your success. Okay. So there are a couple more that I wanted to talk about. Mindfulness is about being more relaxed. And what they say is that meditation or mindfulness practice can be relaxing, but it's not about relaxation. So that's a fiction, okay? That statement's a fiction. And an example that I give is Djokovic, who's a tennis player. I don't know if people have heard of Djokovic, but there's lots of sports people nowadays. So he won Wimbledon, apparently, 5 times. And Djokovic and lots of other sports people nowadays use meditation to help them with their sports. So they practice meditation, but they also use it to help them with their sports. So mindfulness doesn't have to be about being sat down and being sat still. It just needs to be about being in the moment. Okay? And the last one that I'm going to go through is mindfulness is about helping empty your mind of all thoughts. Fact or fiction, and that's a fiction, okay? And the reason for that is quite an important one, and that's because actually it's not possible to empty your mind of all thoughts. It's not possible, we can't do it. And actually the more that we try to do it, often what we'll discover is that more thoughts come in, not less, more, okay? So if you think, right, I'm going to try and not think about a blue elephant, then you are much more likely to have a thought of a blue elephant come into your mind. Okay? So mindfulness isn't about emptying your head of thoughts, but it is about noticing thoughts and then letting them go. They're not getting into that monkey mind pattern, but just noticing them and letting them go. And what they often say is it's, you know, try and think of your thoughts as like leaves floating down a stream, or like clouds passing by in the sky. Okay, and this is something that we'll come to a little bit more later on. So that's the myths, the facts or fiction. So we'll go through that together on the phone as well as what we've done just now. Okay. So if we move now to page 6 in your workbook, mindfulness talks about what mindfulness skills help us do and why they're important. And then at the bottom, it talks about what mindfulness skills are. So here I'm on the bottom of page 6. Okay, so in DBT, like in so many of the different topics that we've already done, it really breaks down what makes up mindfulness, what makes up mindfulness skills, okay? And it talks about the what skills, what are you doing when you're being mindful, and the how skills, how do you do it, okay? And that's to really help us, because mindfulness, I think, for a lot of people who are struggling with their mental health, it can be really hard to focus and to focus on using mindfulness skills and on learning something new. So in this way, DBT has really helped to try and make it accessible, easy for people to be able to learn. Okay. So in this session, we're going to look at the what skills: observing, describing, and participating. So they're on the top thing. Next session, we'll be looking more at the how skills: taking a non-judgmental stance, focusing in the moment, and being effective. Okay? So the what skills, we're now going to take the describing one, which is the second what skill. Okay? So describing, it talks about it's the ability to put into words the experience without adding interpretations. And it talks there about it's essential for communication and self-control. Just the facts. So that's what we do in mindfulness, is we just talk about the facts. That's it, the bare bones, the facts, okay? If you can't feel it and you can't describe it, you don't observe it. If you can't feel it and you don't observe it, you can't describe it, okay? So it's not about things, oh, well, I feel like this is happening, or it's just about what is actually happening in the here and now, okay? And it talks there about feeling afraid doesn't necessarily mean that the situation is life-threatening, okay? So if you feel anxious, you can say, right, I've got an anxious feeling, but not this situation is frightening, because it might not be, it might be, it might not be. So when you're describing in mindfulness, you just describe what's going on. I feel afraid. Okay. Now, one way of doing this is using what they call in mindfulness a beginner's mind. And that's approaching things as though you have never seen them before in your life, even if it is something that you have seen before in your life. And one of the easiest ways to think about this is if you think about the way that you yourself were when you were a child, or you might know children or a child, and think about the way that they approach things. Because often there are lots of things that they haven't seen in their lives, so it is new to them. Okay? And what children tend to do is they tend not to use the labels that we use in everyday life. They tend to really approach things without any labels whatsoever, because sometimes they don't know the labels. And we use labels a lot as adults in our modern life, and that's because we're busy and they're very quick. And labels are really quick, okay? If I rang up my taxi company and I said, right, I'd like a taxi please, and they said to me, right, where would you like to come, where would you like to be picked up from? And I said, well, I'm next to a concrete wall, and I've got a garden in front of me, and there are a couple of other cars on the street. You know, that based on that description, that real describe from what we were talking about in mindfulness, it's not going to get my taxi there. You know, I need to be able to say, I'm at number 30 Stanley Street, you know, it's in Gateshead on the west side or whatever. Okay, so labels are really useful when we're being quick and when we need them to be quick. But sometimes what happens with labels is that they lose the quality of what you're describing. Okay, so an example of this is my son, a number of years ago now, my youngest son, didn't know, or couldn't remember, I think he didn't know, my next door neighbour's name. So for quickness, for me, I would call her Marilyn, okay? But he couldn't remember her name. So instead of saying next door neighbour Marilyn or whatever, he gave a long description of what she looked like, what her house looks like, that the garden was on 2 levels, what her dog looked like. She had this sausage dog, it's a sausage dog. And then he said, oh, and then you come in the garden, you go through the gate, you go up to the front door, and the front door's black, and she lives in there, and who she lived with, along with the dog, and all this lot, okay? And that he was really employing there that beginner's mind, giving that broad description, the shape of the dog, the colour of the front door, you know, the different, that she had steps in a garden, okay? And that really employing that beginner's mind that they do when they're children. One of the things that was interesting to me about my son's description is that my next door neighbour Marilyn's front door is like next to my front door. I live in a terrace. So we're pretty much, you know, it's the next door along, and the doors are close together, about a foot or so apart. And if you had asked me before Evan's description what colour her front door was, I don't know if I could have told you. And that's the problem with labels, is that we get so focused, oh, it's Marilyn, Marilyn lives there, she's number 12, whatever, that we can lose the actual quality of what we're describing. I couldn't remember the colour of her front door. Okay? So, what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick exercise that looks a bit more or a bit further at this beginner's mind. Okay? Now, we've got the rules for the exercise in your workbook. And that's on the top of page 8. And what I'm going to do is I am going to describe a mystery object to you, okay? I'm going to describe a mystery object to you, and I would like you to either draw or guess what the object is based on my description, which will take a couple of minutes, okay? Now this is an exercise that you might want to do with your family over the time, if there's anybody, or friends, if there's anybody that you in the lockdown that you have contact with. And if you did it together with somebody, what you do is sit back to back, and one person would do what I'm doing, which is describe, and the other person would guess. Okay? Now, when you're doing this exercise, you have to follow the rules as they're written down in the workbook. So you do describe what makes up the object, okay? Complete the exercise with a beginner's mind and mindful awareness. So you really try and stay in the present moment, some of the things that we've talked about already, and take that beginner's mind as if you have never seen whatever the object is before. So I will say, what else you can do is you can mention colours, you can mention shapes, and you can mention, you know, kind of, I can't think what the word is, but like if it's metal or plastic or something like that, you can mention it, so what kind of makes the materials that make up the object. But that's it, okay? And as it says on the don't side, you don't use any labels or names to describe your object. You're just describing it, Even if you know what it is, you would not say what it was. Just say, you know, it's a piece of plastic, it's kind of round. Okay? So if you were describing a spoon, you would say, yeah, piece of plastic, kind of round at the top, it's got a long thin bit. You would not say it's a spoon, and you would not say, importantly, the next bit, what it's used for, which is, you wouldn't say, oh, you use it to eat with, or something like that. Okay? Try not to say what it looks like, just try and describe. Okay? So I'm going to describe an object to you. Are you ready? You might want to get a pen and a piece of paper to draw the object, or you might just want to listen, and then you can try and work out whether you've got it right, and I'll show you at the end. Okay? So the object that I've got is about probably about 5 centimetres long, and half of it's a little bit more than half is metal, and a little bit less than half is plastic, black plastic. Okay? So I'll describe the black plastic bit first. So the black plastic bit's a square, just about a square, and on one side, one of the sides of the square is like a half moon shape over the side. I shouldn't have used my fingers to describe it. It's a half moon shape, okay? And the half moon shape is a bit hollowed out inside, okay? So you can go right through, I can look right through from one side to the other. In the middle of the square, there's another circle, and it has zigzags going up and down. So it's got 2 lines of zigzags going up and down inside that circle. The middle of the square is a bit indented. It's like lower than the outside of the square. Okay. So the metal bit comes out of the other side of the square to where the half moon shape is. It comes out of the other side there, and it's a rectangle that's not as, it's thinner. It's probably only about half a centimetre, so it's less than one side of the square, okay, and it's sort of sat in the middle of the square, and it's a long rectangle that like points out, okay. It gets slightly narrower towards the end of the rectangle, and it's probably about 3 centimetres long, okay. It's, yeah, about half a centimetre wide. From the bottom, going to kind of 2/3 of the way along of the rectangle, there's like a shape cut out of it. The shape's not like any shape, like it's not like a circle or a triangle or something like that. It's just a bit of an odd shape that's kind of cut out of it. So it looks like a sort of wobbly line. It's just a bit of an odd shape. Okay. At the top, next to the plastic, there's like a square that comes out, a black square that's sort of drawn onto the metal, and then on top of the black square, like a very small black square, on top of the black square there's a circle. Okay. I hope that you've managed my terrible descriptions. I'm not the best describer. I'm not the best describer. You could have got somebody else, it would have been much better than me. So I thought what I would do is let you see what it is. Dun, dun, dun. So there you go, can you see it properly? So there's the, you see like the indentations, there's the half moon, and there's the bit where I was saying, I think I was actually looking that side maybe, where it's like indented in the metal. So I wonder how many of you thought that that's what it was going to look like. Was it exactly what you expected or not? Okay. And I wonder if you just take a couple of minutes. So in the handout, there are some questions about the exercise. And I wonder if you could just take a couple of minutes now, maybe to put a pause on the video, just to think about, was it hard to do? Was it hard to describe or understand what I was talking about without the label? Because obviously if I was using a label, I would say, oh, khaki, you know, and that would that make it easier? Did you notice? Did you learn anything? So just if you could take a couple of minutes just to fill out those questions in your workbook at the bottom of page 8. The last question, it says, do you use unhelpful labels in your life? And often the most unhelpful labels that we use are about ourselves, talking about ourselves as stupid or thick or ugly, and they can be really, really unhelpful labels. Oh, I'm depressed, and actually, you know, saying, oh, I'm depressed all the time and I never get anything right, I can never do anything right. You know, sometimes it could be worthwhile thinking, well, actually, is that true? Is that what's actually going on, or is sometimes does my mood move along? And just really think about how useful those labels are and how helpful they are to you to say those things about ourselves, because that's what we can do sometimes. Okay, so the next exercise is about participating. So this is the next skill, the next mindfulness skill, participating without self-consciousness. And it talks here about entering into the moment completely, participating with your attention, and really focusing on what's going on in the here and now. And what we're going to do is an exercise that involves a glass of water, so you might need to go away and get a glass of water. So you need to have a glass with just a little bit of water that I'm not going to expect you to drink, and you mainly need to be able to see the surface of the water when you hold the glass. Okay, so if you need to go and get one, please do. Right, so I'm going to assume that you've got your water, and what I would like you to do is to hold the water at arm's length. Now, I'm not going to do this whole exercise because it puts me at the other end of the room. Okay, but I would like you to stand up, if you can, if you've got space and if you feel able, and put the water at arm's length from your body. Now, we're going to do that for a couple of minutes, that's all. Okay, and I'm going to talk you through a guided exercise. So, when you're ready, stand up, hold the water at arm's length. I'm just going to hold it bent because it just means that I'm a long way away from you, from the camera otherwise. Okay, so stand up, put your arms straight, hold on to the water. And the purpose of the exercise is to look at the surface of the water and to hold the glass still, and to get the surface of the water to stay still. Okay? Really try and pay attention and focus on getting the surface of the water in the glass still. Try and do this exercise with mindful awareness. So remember, really focusing on the here and now, noticing any thoughts that you might have about the exercise or how you're doing in the exercise, pains that you might have in your arm or physical sensations, or in the rest of your body, down the side, your neck, jaw. Just, as well as being aware of those things, focus your attention on trying to hold the glass in such a way that the surface of the water doesn't move. Now, we're going to bring this exercise to a close. So in your own time, when you're ready, pop the water down on the table. And just again, with that mindful approach, just have an awareness of how your arm and your hand is now feeling. So try not to move it too quickly, just move it gently, your arm and your hand. And just think, have an awareness, that present moment awareness that they talk about. What's going on in your arm and your hand? Is it feeling quite heavy? Maybe a bit tingly? Maybe your shoulders feeling a bit tingly. Okay? And that's the exercise, the end of the exercise, about holding the water and trying to get the surface of the water to lay still. Now, I wondered how you got on with that exercise, and I wonder if people were able to get the surface of the water to lay still. Now, sad to say, I did play a bit of a trick on you, because it's not really possible to get the surface of the water to stay still. And indeed, I've done this exercise and people, for different reasons, have not been able to hold the water, so they've had the water down on the table. And sometimes even then, the surface of the water hasn't stood still. So we really haven't got a chance if we're holding it in our hands. There's just too much movement in our bodies for lots of different reasons that mean that the surface of the water wouldn't hold still. So I wonder if you had any thoughts about that exercise when you were doing it, like, oh, this is too hard, or a thought that I can do it, or a thought that I can't do it. I wonder as well, and it talks on the sheet, whether you got caught up in making your own rules. I have to do it, I have to be the best at doing it, I have to do it quickly, I have to do it now. Or whether it had any memories or associations. In the workbook, it also talks about if your mind wandered when you were doing the exercise, and trying to notice where it might have wandered to as well. So there are a few things that you could write down and think about when you're doing the participation exercise. Okay? And we can talk about during the form coaching. So the last skill that we're going to look at today is the observing skill. So that's attending to events and emotions, behaviour responses, how we act basically. And observing is about taking that step back from situations and how we react, and just creating a little bit of space between us and what's going on. And again, if you think about your thoughts, so a good way of understanding this is that often our thoughts can be like traffic in the road. So it can be, our minds can be full of lots of different thoughts. So if you think that they're just like lots of different cars going in different directions. And what we often do as human beings is kind of tramp on into that road and try and redirect different thoughts. I'm not thinking about you, I'm thinking about this one. Or maybe you might kind of get into the car and drive off with one thought, oh yeah, that's right, and think about that thought, okay? And that's something that we might do. So if our thoughts were like cars on the road, we can often get very involved in them. Mindfulness is about sitting at the side of the road and watching the thoughts without getting involved, as we normally would do, okay? And that's the difference between mindfulness and how we are normally, and that's the skill observe, okay? And in the workbook, I hope you can read it, there's a cartoon there saying, observe your thoughts as if you were watching a friend. And there's two pictures of the same Buddha. So one's just him being a Buddha, And the next one is all the thoughts that are going on inside his head. And it's just saying, you know, just observe them. Just notice that you're having them. Okay? So today we're going to do a last exercise which will give us the opportunity to observe. It's the 5 senses exercise, which people may have practiced already. It's something that they use quite a lot at Rococo, at the Recovery College. It's a really good mindfulness exercise. So it takes a couple of minutes and it involves sitting still. So again, if you'd like to make yourself comfortable in your chair with your feet flat on the floor, and either close your eyes or make your gaze go downwards. Now, take a few moments to focus on your breath, paying attention to your breath coming in and going out. Begin by making sure that your breaths are long and slow, making sure that they're coming from your diaphragm or stomach. You might become aware of tension in your body. Try and let go of that tension on the out-breath. Now, we're going to go through our 5 senses. And the first one that we're going to start with is our sense of sight, what we can see. So I would like us to look around the room, look around the space that you're in. Try and notice 5 things that you can see. Try and pick up something that you wouldn't normally notice. Maybe your fringe in front of your eyes, a crack in the paint or concrete. Try and notice 5 things that you can see. Now, in your own time, take a nice deep breath like we did at the beginning. And we're moving on to things that you can feel. So noticing 4 things that you can feel. So that might be clothes against your skin, air or the temperature of the room against your skin, surface of the table, might be rumbling in your tummy, feeling of your breath under your nose. 4 things that you can feel. Take another of those nice deep breaths that we talked about. Let go of that sense and we'll move on to the next one. I'd like you to notice 3 things that you can hear. So there might be things that are far away, they might be near, from the video, outside, next door. Three things that you can hear. So take a nice deep breath again and let go of that sense and move on to noticing 2 things that you can smell. So maybe it's a smell from the outside, food somewhere, smell of clothes or scent, the room more generally. Maybe you've got pets or something, maybe you can smell them. 2 things that you can smell. Take a nice deep breath, let go of that sense. Move on to the last one. Notice 1 thing that you can taste. What's going on in your mouth. Okay. And that's the end of that exercise. And that's a really good exercise that people can use to help ground themselves, to help focus their attention when they're out and about and things can be tricky. Okay, and you can use your 5 senses in that way. So there's more kind of questions at the back of the book on the last couple of pages about how mindfulness can be helpful in your life and when you can use mindfulness skills, and about your homework. I'm going to give one last story about mindfulness being helpful. Okay. So I remember when I very first started teaching mindfulness to people in groups, and one of my students went away and did her homework, and she practiced mindfulness skills with her friend in the garden. So her friend asked her to close her eyes, and she closed her eyes, and then her friend said, right, take a deep breath in and smell what's around you, and what can you smell? And the student said, well, I can smell a rollie, I can smell your husband smoking his rollie, and I can smell grass. Okay? She opened her eyes, and they both recognised that they weren't things that she would have noticed before she'd really focused her attention on that. And then my student turned around to me and said, yeah, but oh wait, Debs, what's the point of all of this? Why am I learning that? Why am I bothering to learn about the grass and the rollies? What good's it going to do me? And what I said to her was that actually the grass and the rollies were there all of the time. That smell was there all of the time. But what we tend to do in everyday life is filter out a lot of the things that are going on. And sometimes that can be helpful because it means that we can multitask. But sometimes we are filtering out important information about ourselves, about how our emotions change, how our moods change, how our thoughts change. And then being mindful and having that awareness can help us in managing our emotions and our moods. Okay? So some of the how we use mindfulness skills in our lives is something that we can discuss in the phone coaching. And also, as part of the homework, we would like you to choose an exercise to do, an activity, to do every day. So you can do the same activity, like brushing your teeth, or drinking a cup of tea, or having a shower, or you can practice different activities over the week, okay? But we would like you to do or have done about 7 activities. And then we can talk to you in the phone coaching. Good luck with your homework and practicing mindfulness. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will put out another one soon of part 2. Bye bye.